from leaked projects we were never supposed to know existed, all the way to a lost AAA multiplayer game, there have been a ton of FNAF games that never released. And today, we're gonna talk about the story of these games, why they never saw the light of day, and also where they are now, starting with one of the most mysterious titles, FNAF Into Madness. On August 18th, 2018, creator Scott Cawthon would make a post on the Ultimate Custom Night Steam page titled The Upcoming Projects Mega Thread. A thread the developer said he would use to give fans updates on long-awaited projects such as the FNAF movie and other games in development at the time, including some bigger ones featuring later in this video. And in this post, Scott had discussed creating a new game he just called Untitled FNAF Game by Me, saying, "I've been playing with the idea of making a new game that's just for fun in the spirit of Foxy Fighters, or a mashup of games in the vein of Update 2, a recently released update to the game FNAF World, where many games connected to create a single experience." So based on this description, apparently there was a new spin-off Scott was working on that would be a compilation piece of arcade-style minigames, similar to things already seen in games like FNAF World, like Foxy Fighters. But while this game's description was pretty bare, a few months later on November 12th, Scott would update this thread and the game, even giving it the title FNAF Into Madness, labeled as 0% complete with the update reading, "This is the next game that I want to work on myself someday." A compilation of several previous gameplay ideas in the same vein as Update 2, just a free game for the fanbase. There isn't a guarantee that it will happen though. So again, Scott restates his idea for what this game could be, and this time even gives it a full-blown title, suggesting development for it would start shortly. Or would it? Because following this, we wouldn't get any updates on Into Madness for almost another year, all the way until August of 2019, where Scott would finally update the thread again, listing the title as FNAF Into Madness on hold, with the update reading, "This game was originally going to be a project that I worked on myself, but now it looks like it might be a future project for Steelwool. 2021 maybe. Right now, however, I'm working on 58. Another in-development title that eventually became FNAF Freddy in Space 2. So now, this time around, Scott had put the game FNAF Into Madness on hold and had told us it was probably going to be taken over by the developer Steelwool Studios, the company that would eventually work over most FNAF media, creating games like Help Wanted and FNAF Security Breach. However, mysteriously, just a few weeks later, on September 29th of the same year, Scott would give us just one more update on FNAF Into Madness, simply just saying, "FNAF Into Madness on hold, or is it?" with no accompanying description, giving us an ambiguous but also hopeful look into the game's potential release in the years coming. But this hope would eventually be squandered when, on December 8th of 2019, Scott would announce that he would no longer be updating the mega thread these updates were held on, mostly because the majority of the projects on this thread, like Help Wanted and FNAF AR, were already fully released, and so there was no need to keep updating this thread, permanently closing it down, while also quietly shutting down the production of FNAF Into Madness as well. But this was all the way back in 2019, nearly 5 years ago, so what happened to it today? Well, while the game itself never officially released in its entirety, theorists have speculated on places like Reddit and YouTube that the game might have still existed in some capacity. As in 2021, after FNAF Security Breach released, people noticed in-game there were a ton of arcade cabinets that contained a bunch of different minigames, very similar to how FNAF Into Madness was going to be an arcade game compilation. And in fact, one of these arcade cabinets in particular, called Balloon World, hid some folders in the game's files titled Scott Into Madness, possibly teasing that this is what at least a part of the game would have looked like back when it was still in development. However, with how long ago that game was announced, it seems like we might not ever truly know, but that mystery is nothing compared to the next game, FNAF Balloon Circus. It's not totally uncommon for upcoming FNAF games to get leaked early. Security Breach's title was leaked months before release, and FNAF Into the Pit had its whole trailer leaked before it was even announced. But one of the most infamous instances of a FNAF game leaking early occurred in mid-2022 when a bunch of characters made by Funko started to leak into the public with codenames Security Breach, Balloon, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, along with Circus and Clown versions as well. Now, at the time, based on the fact that these characters were marked as security breach characters, most people assumed this was a leak of the upcoming Five Nights at Freddy's Ruined DLC releasing the next year.
You may notice that they're listed under the security breach tag, meaning they're somehow affiliated with security breach. I think it could be pretty likely this is our first glimpse at a brand new set of characters coming in the upcoming Ruined DLC.
But a few months later, we began to see official teasers for what these characters would actually end up looking like, showing some unique and bizarre action figures and pops of the 4 classic characters wearing a multitude of circus-themed outfits, suggesting this might have been a completely new game in development they were teasing early. In fact, as the figures started to get officially revealed, descriptions of them would pop up onto online stores, advertising fans to collect your favorite characters from Five Nights at Freddy's Balloon Circus with this assortment of new figures featuring the game's frighteningly cute animatronics, giving us confirmation that these figures were in fact for a brand new game officially in development titled FNAF Balloon Circus that was presumably being developed and worked on at the time. They slowly would reveal pop figures, action figures, mystery minis, bundles, standalone t-shirts, plushes, and more, suggesting this title was going to be pretty big when it released shortly after. Or so we thought, as once the circus stuff officially released for people to buy despite no game attachment, there was radio silence from the developers about its existence. They never acknowledged this merch line, what Balloon Circus was, or what happened to it even after releasing multiple new games since. And in fact, fast forward to now, these characters and their origin is still a mystery that lives on in the FNAF community to this day with no concrete answers. So what happened to FNAF Balloon Circus? Well, with no dev confirmations or even teases, it's still really hard to tell. Some theorize maybe it was a scrapped game they just already made merch for, so they decided to release them anyway to cut their losses, while others theorize this could still be a real game in development that could come out at some point in the future. And in fact, there's actually a bit of evidence for this theory, since in July of 2023, the developers would release FNAF Security Breach's Ruined DLC. And while none of the Balloon Circus characters were in the game like originally thought, if you dig in the files of the title, you can actually find a leftover message to the developer team in an unused area while the game was still being built, reading something cool that maybe foreshadows Carnival, pending J-Top, the Steelwool Studios co-founder's thoughts, suggesting that originally there was going to be some kind of teaser or object in this area for an upcoming project relating to carnivals, an almost identical theme to what we saw in the FNAF Balloon Circus line with clowns and balloons. Plus, Steelwool's most recent game, FNAF Help 1 and 2, is filled with even more carnival references, like the AI voice in the Helpy minigames being called the Carnival Nurse for literally no reason, and the multiple references to a location in the universe called Fall Fest, a mysterious festival started in 1970, teased in both the first and second game, that outside of the occasional references and mini games has never been fully revealed, theorized by many to possibly be the next game's location and what these characters and references were originally for, since the heavily referenced festival has been shown to have carousels and other circus and carnival-like themes we've seen teased multiple times already. So maybe in the future we will actually see what these characters were for and their mystery will finally be solved. But more importantly, this brings us to the devastating story of FNAF's AAA multiplayer title. One of the most popular game request ideas in the FNAF universe is a Five Nights at Freddy's multiplayer game, something that people can actually play with friends and enjoy together, since even up until this day, there is nothing of its kind in the franchise outside of many fan games and one shameless Roblox game so bad it got deleted within hours. But it would be a pleasant surprise when back on November 12th of 2018, on the same mega thread as FNAF Into Madness, another new game would show up on Scott's upcoming projects list, simply titled AAA Game 0%. AAA meaning a high-budget mainstream title like GTA or Call of Duty, so at the time, this announcement was a pretty big deal. And Scott first described this upcoming AAA title by saying, "There is a big deal in the works to create an incredible big-budget game. I can't reveal any details yet as this project is still in its planning stages, but I'm working closely with the studio involved to ensure that it delivers what I think FNAF fans will want want to see. So a new AAA max budget FNAF game was going to be in the works, and from the sound of Scott himself, he seemed extremely excited about the idea, which would only be expressed more when he would update the mega thread again next August with more great news. AAA game 0% complete. A deal has been signed with Universal to create a AAA multiplayer game. They've had a few setbacks getting started, but hopefully they will get it worked out soon. There were some really cool ideas for a ETA 2021. So now, not only did Scott manage to get a deal with Universal of all people, but he actually already had a release estimate for the game of 2021 already. And furthermore, this AAA game would be multiplayer, finally fulfilling the dream so many FNAF fans have wanted for years, and at a level this large, this was going to by far be the biggest thing that Scott and the entire franchise have ever worked on, assuming of course it released. But unfortunately, things didn't always stay positive, as on September 13th, Scott would actually give us another good piece of news, saying that we would finally get an update in the next week, again giving us hope for this new game. But after a few weeks passed with still no update, Scott would return once more on September 29th with horrible news, titling the update, AAA game canceled. Well, not really. There has been a shakeup for this project. I'm actually not at liberty to discuss some details, but I'm taking control of this one and feel a lot better about its direction. This won't get started until late 2020, however. So out of absolutely nowhere in a month, Scott went from having a big deal with a major company, Universal, in August, to now announcing the game was completely off the table and he was going to have to produce it himself from scratch. And even worse, as we mentioned previously, in December 2019, Scott would permanently lock this thread, leaving this game to also be lost to time. So again, headed back to the present, what happened to FNAF's AAA multiplayer game? Well, there's actually a good but sad reason why the game might have gotten canceled. Since as Scott mentioned, he signed the game deal with Universal in August of 2019 and supposedly had an update coming the week of September 13th. However, literally just a couple days later on September 19th, NBC Universal would announce they were closing down their game publishing business entirely, citing the reason for this closure as them being in favor of other priorities with their money and wanting to instead license out their IPs rather than make and publish games themselves. And in line with Universal's closure, in Scott's next update on September 29th, he said the project was being moved independently because of a major shakeup, with that major shakeup most likely being the closure of Universal's game department, leaving this AAA game idea without a home. And while Scott did claim he wanted to work on the game independently, I highly doubt he'd have the time or resources to fund an entire AAA project single-handedly before his retirement a couple years later. Scott was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, leaving what would have been FNAF's biggest game ever as lost media.